When we're talking about the cognitive areas of the brain, we're mostly talking about the frontal lobe with some help from the temporal and parietal lobe, as well as subcortical regions. So when I refer to subcortical regions, that relates to if we split the brain in half and see all of the little pieces and parts on the inside of the brain, that is subcortical. Otherwise, we have the cortical regions, which are primarily the lobes. So let's first divide the brain in two hemispheres. We have the left and the right side. When we're talking about the left side, that's our more analytical side. So these are the people who say they're good at math and science. But really our left side is for more of the language cortex, as well as number or computational skills. And it also controls the right side of the body. So if there's injury to the brain on the left side, or the left cerebral hemisphere, then there can be deficits on the right side of the body. If you wiggle your right hand, you're getting the commands from the left motor strip of the brain. The right side is more of our abstract side. These are the people who say that they're artsy. And the right side is really for organizing information and abstract meaning. It provides context. It's for spatial relationships and visual information for facial recognition. It also helps with intuition and emotion. And so it's more of regulation for our personality. And when we talk about the cognitive areas, it is a relationship between the right and left hemisphere, but more so on the right side and again in the frontal lobe. So let's break down all of the areas for cognition and how it can relate to communication, and I want you to think about this as we're going along. So our cognitive areas can include visual perception, so that goes back to orientation, to time and place and person, and the orientation to where you are in a room, if you move forward or backwards, if something is close to you or far away. You know what day of the week it is, you know where you're located, you know who people are when they come to see you. And so when we think about visual perception, this is part of the frontal lobe with assistance from the parietal lobe because it's including that sensory information, the visual interpretation, and some of the occipital lobe. So this is where those neural networks really come into play. So we have to have facial recognition and spatial awareness, which are cognitive skills influencing orientation. Then we have initiation or inhibition of a behavior or task. So if you need to get up and go to school, you have to initiate your body movements to sit up and get out of bed. You also have to have ongoing initiation throughout the day to keep you motivated to go through a task. And then you have to have inhibition to stop that task. So, for example, if you're walking to class, you have to have initiation of the steps and inhibition of the steps when you get to your destination. If you don't stop those steps, you can run into things or you can miss your class because you keep walking. So it also relates to impulse control, where you have to stop yourself in the middle of a task or stop a task from starting. And then we have attention, and we talked a little bit about attention. We have divided attention, where we're alternating our attention between two tasks. We have selective attention, where we have two tasks that should be occurring, but we're really focusing the attention on one task. And then we have sustained attention, where we're holding our attention for a longer period of time. And so that is one of our main areas of cognition. And then we have personality, which also relates to our emotional experiences and expressions. So if we are generally mild-tempered, if we get upset very easily, if we are happy all of the time, that can relate to our cognitive abilities. It can also relate to our expressions of our emotions. So if we have anxiety, how do we show that? Do we shut down completely? Or do we push through tasks? Do we show some aggressiveness? Or do we yell at people? Or do we get upset? It can also relate to our social inappropriateness. So in a conversation, do we yell at someone for no reason? Do we say inappropriate things? Or are we not saying enough? We're being withheld or withdrawn. That's part of our cognitive abilities. And then we have the executive functions, which control and regulate most of what we do day to day. So these are our higher level cognitive abilities, like planning. So if you know you need to go from one class to the next and you have a 20-minute break in between, planning ahead of time to contact a friend and meet them in the middle for a cup of coffee, versus accidentally running into them or, texting them at the last minute, hey, let's grab some coffee, and hoping it works out. It also relates to inferencing, so understanding abstract meanings. If someone looks upset, understanding that their behaviors and attitudes toward you indicate a certain emotion. And then there's time management, which also goes back to planning. Do you have enough time to complete a task, and how do you need to adjust that? And then for planning, also organization. So if you're somebody who maybe in high school your locker was very crowded and things would fall out when you open it, or even now your car has a lot of things in it, or are you somebody who has everything nice and clean and it has a place? Then there's judgment, and that's judgment for if you have a certain amount of time for things, judgment for what is good and bad, judgment of decisions that you need to be made, and problem solving relates to that as well. If there's a problem, how are you going to approach that problem? What do you need to do to solve that problem? This is the if one door is locked, should we try another door to see if it's open kind of situation. There's self-monitoring, which relates back to emotional expressions and the monitoring of your abilities. So if you are upset and you're in a situation where you can't express your emotions very much, you have that monitoring to know that you're not doing it quite right. Or when you are doing something wrong, the awareness that you have been doing it wrong, or that you need to fix what you've been doing. And then the awareness of your abilities and limitations. So, for instance, if you lose your right hand and you're right-handed, you're aware that you can't write with that hand anymore, which seems like a silly thing to say, but sometimes with our cognitive deficits, they become unaware of their limitations like that. And then pragmatics. So pragmatics is, again, the use of language in those social situations, which if you look at all of these cognitive areas, really can impact the overall pragmatics. So we'll talk about in just a moment how all of these areas, if they are impacted, can result in different deficits and how that can relate to communication.